Everyone turn around, look at the people coming in like they did something wrong. Now point. Hey, Ed, I saw SCOTUS come in. Did you get iced? Why did you not get ice? Ed has no problem saying no to things because he has self-respect. I, however, do not. Actually, this might be the first time Ed SCOTUS has been iced. Woo! Let's do Morton's later to wash the pain away. All right, let's get started. Thank you very much for attending the Penetration Trends Report of 2016. It's something I've been trying to do every single year for the past 2 years. Failed this year. I'll explain why. I've got a good excuse, but we're going to get to it. So what are the trends that are out there right now? So if you take a look at Verizon and Mandiant, Verizon came out with their data breach report, and every other security company in the world is basically like, we've got to do that too. That's good marketing. And some things have been very, very, very unsettling about these different trends reports. Mainly, it becomes very clear if you trend out the trends reports for breaches, it becomes very clear that we aren't learning a goddamn thing in this industry. Period. So I figured clearly they'll listen to a penetration testing company. But we wait for these things to come out, we get really, really, really excited, and they say the same crap as the year before, again and again and again. And it's not really providing a lot of insight as to what is actually happening in the world of exploitation and taking over computer systems. And by and large, for a number of years, this was true in the world of penetration testing. For example, how many of you have got access last year with 08067? Yep, it still comes up on a fairly regular basis, and it's like, did you learn anything at all? The Java social engineering attack, with the Java applet attack, how many years did that work before Java's like, maybe that crap's kind of dangerous? I think it was like 8, 9 years. So we had this really long run where we were using the exact same techniques again and again and again and again and again because they worked. And then things started changing a little bit last year. We started seeing a lot more lockdown restrictions whenever it came to Java apps, especially within the browser, trying to stop the apps from running. And that was a good thing. That was progression. So the question is, are we actually seeing more progression in information security at all? We decided to do something similar, talking to a large number of different penetration testing firms, asking a series... There are 4 lights! No. You got that. All right, so we tried to do something similar and tried to see if things actually matched up with what the bad guys are doing and what penetration testers are actually doing. And really, it feels like we have 3 separate rooms in information security. We have the penetration testing community, and let's pretend that they are in like a room called Break It, possibly. Then we have the defenders, right? They're trying to fix things and make things better. And then we have the forensics analysts who actually legitimately called themselves forensicators. Like they woke up one morning and said, you know what, this is a good idea. These are also the people that you have to explain that this is a pedometer, it's not a pedometer, they're 2 completely different things. But at any rate, the whole point is we occupy different rooms and we don't really communicate with each other as well as we actually should be communicating with each other. And how do we actually try to break that down? So let's talk a little bit about some trends that we're seeing, and we're going to dive into it. First, the external low-hanging fruit is getting rarer. It's not gone. Please understand that it is absolutely not gone. If you guys were following Fear, the attacker named Fear, who did Fear compromise and then compromise a whole bunch of other customers of that organization? Anyone tracking that? Neustar. Took over Neustar systems and then took over a bunch of customers, and they got access to FTP servers. hacking literally like it's 1999 was still working for this particular attacker. So there's still some low-hanging fruit that is out there, but we're seeing it get rarer and rarer and rarer on the outside of organizations. You don't simply run Nessus, find a red critical, and then gain access to that computer system because it's just not there anymore. And that's a good thing. That's a good trend, right? We can't be frustrated about these. If you take anything in the world of penetration testing or attacks and all of a sudden you can't get in, you should never take that as, wow, this sucks, I can no longer use my bag of tricks that I've used for years. It means that we've got to learn something new. And that's ultimately why a lot of us get into network penetration testing. And we try to get into things like breaking into networks as well. So yeah, old vulnerabilities do still work, especially on the inside and especially with client-side exploitation. A lot of those vulnerabilities are still wide open. You can still gain access. I'm going to explain why that's important a little bit later. Mobile should be an issue. I have a whole slide dedicated to this, but honestly, a lot of organizations have backed away from testing their mobile apps for a really ridiculously stupid reason, but generally mobile is not an issue or as much of an issue as it actually should be in organizations. Now, internal is an outright hot mess. It's a complete disaster. Once you get a foothold in an organization, it is just a matter of time before you pivot, you get domain administrator, and then you basically own absolutely everything within that organization. It's like all of the lessons that we were taught whenever we were learning at the CISSP, defense in depth. We said, screw it, we got a firewall. And we've been holding on and clinging to that as an idea for the last 15 years. Meanwhile, it doesn't work at all. We also see a large amount of resistance whenever we're trying to test the right things and the right approach. And finally, we're seeing a heavy skew between what is actually being tested in multiple organizations and what the attackers themselves are actually doing. So let's talk about some of the trends that really haven't changed, and this becomes incredibly important. The first trend that has not changed much at all is users. This is important because it just requires a single user to click a link or run an application, run a Java app, run an HTA file, go out on the internet with a vulnerable plugin in their browser, and they're compromised, or possibly entering in their credentials as well. Now, whenever we look at what we see in penetration testing, out of all the things that we test, it is one of the smaller subsets that the organizations that we test actually have us test. The common quote that we get all the time is, we don't need to test that because we know it is going to work. Now, I can agree with not testing it because there's an understanding that it is going to work. But why do we allow it to continue to work is a much larger question. So if you ever get a chance, I want you to read the Verizon data breach reports, read the last 3 years. And they steadily get more insane. If you go back 3 years ago, they got a lot of graphs, they got a lot of data, it's very well written. By the time you get to this year's Verizon data breach report, it's like they can't go a paragraph without a witty pun or some kind of joke built into the report. And the reason why this fundamentally bothers me is because they're trying to make it look interesting. When the fact of the matter is, when you start breaking these things down and analyzing what is actually being said in these reports, a tremendous amount of the data, a tremendous amount of what they're saying has not changed from previous years. For example, it's either 80s or 90% of the time, whenever organizations get compromised by a targeted attack, it is through targeted spear phishing. It is through someone using the exact same of attacks that have worked 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Everyone say hi. What's your name? Chris. Everyone say hi, Chris. Hi, Chris. 2 things about Chris. 1, he has guts. He came right up to the front and he sat right in front, and that's awesome. And number 2, he was like, I hope they don't notice me. So thank you very much for coming. So we're seeing again and again where the exact same attack vectors are working again and again and again, but we're really not seeing organizations do that much to try to stop those attacks, at least as much as we'd like to see them stop those attacks. I believe firmly in user awareness and user education. I absolutely do, but I think it's completely understandable why many organizations would say, we're giving up on user education, we're giving up on user awareness, because you still have a percentage of the users that are going to click on links. And in most penetration tests with most of the companies that I've talked to, you're looking anywhere between 13 to 20% of the people will click on anything that you send them. You send them a link in an email that says spear phishing test. And above the link, you say, do not click this link. You will fail the spear phishing test. 13 to 20% of the people will click that link. And 100% of the security team will click that link. So we see this again and again. And for each of these different trends and the things that I was talking about, I wanted to come up with a lesson. What can we look at? And what can we learn? And I don't honestly know what we can learn here. We learned? Well, users just click on things. Have we collectively given up on this in security? There have been things that we've given up on. Absolutely. For example, users accessing private email in Gmail or Yahoo Mail or Hotmail if they're really, really old. We have people that are still accessing their private email. We allow that because as an industry, we collectively looked at that as a security attack vector and said, screw it, we'll let that through. Are we doing that with our user population? Is it a good idea? Now, I'm not trying to say that it is or is not a good idea. I've already told you my thoughts. I believe user awareness is important. But as an industry, have we given up on trying to prevent users from clicking on links? Personally, it's starting to look a lot like we have. Or whenever we do test it, we try to test it in such a way to minimize any embarrassment that may occur within the organization. The next trend is mobile should without question be an issue. Would anybody like to take well, I have it on a bullet point. Why is it that a lot of organizations have decided not to test their mobile applications? Because the CEO, the CIO, the CTO read these reports and they say, I've got all these problems, but mobile is not one of them. Because the report says nobody's compromising mobile devices and targeting users of those devices. It's not an issue. And CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, CTOs look at this and they say there's no reason whatsoever to test our mobile apps. Now, to be sure, we do have some customers that we test mobile apps. And they're great customers, and we love those customers. But I'm seeing in more of our calls with customers, pre-sales calls, and when we get into testing calls, people saying this is not an issue, we should absolutely ignore it. But if we look at testing mobile applications, what we're seeing on the other side, even though that's not actively being used to exploit users, on the other side, we're seeing these huge vulnerabilities that are basically the equivalent of hacking like it's 1999. Very little protections whatsoever built into the applications. Simply changing user IDs in many situations allows you to jump to another user's account and steal all of their data very, very easily. We see that constantly. So what do we do as an industry? Do we continue to ignore mobile applications, or do we continue trying to test mobile applications? And I've come to the realization just how powerful a couple of small things in the industry can be. Like a Verizon data breach report saying mobile is not an issue can actually shut down a large amount of mobile testing. You guys remember years ago, whenever Gartner came out with a report and said IDS is dead. How many of you had bosses that said, we're going to rip out intrusion detection systems because Gartner said is it a dead technology? There's a large number of people that basically stopped implementing the technology because some stupid report said that they should stop implementing that technology. And we've seen that again. I also believe that internal is a mess. If I go through the reports, once we get access to a system, it is a very short period of time in most networks, not all networks. I'll get to that here in a second. That once we are in the inside of the network, it is a matter of hours. And with Bloodhound and some of the other tools, it's a matter of minutes once Bloodhound finishes running for you to get domain administrator. It's very, very quick. In fact, I'm now coming to the conclusion that Active Directory is merely a means for pen testers to make our lives easy. If we look at PowerShell, there's a lot of security tools that will alert on any execution of PowerShell. Let that sink in for a second. Is PowerShell that heavily used by the pen testing and exploitation community and not used by systems administrators? How many of you guys use PowerShell as part of your systems administration every single day? And we have people that are literally creating signatures that as soon as PowerShell executes, we immediately flag it as malicious and then try to stop it. So what does that mean? That means that attackers and penetration testers have successfully exfiltrated a large number of gray areas. Identifying areas that are used by systems administrators, used legitimately, and then taking over those various gray areas, and then using those to take over the rest of the network. And it's getting to the point where security vendors, many times their only way to stop this, at least they think, is to simply block and stop an alert on all PowerShell execution. That's a horrifying development in computer security. In fact, we have some customers that have no Active Directory at all. They're customers where they run Mac, they maybe run Linux, and they're very proud of that fact. And you would think, with traditional wisdom in information security, that those networks would be far easier networks to break into. And yes, you can get access to a single system, but by their very lack of design, they are segmented and compartmentalized, and they actually have defense in depth. To the point where you exploit a single system, you cannot pass the hash. You cannot run Mimikatz. You cannot run a number of the tools if it's like Linux in a Mac environment, like Responder, to basically steal credentials and then pivot around the inside of the environment. Because all of that connective tissue that holds your environment together in Active Directory is gone. Now please don't take this to mean that we should immediately stop using Active Directory. But I think that we need to wake up and realize that the way it's actually being abused today is making things very, very easy for attackers. Further, being the fact that it's extremely easier for attackers to pivot post-exploitation, to fix it, it is an incredible problem. Think about this as a defender, right? If I go to an organization that has 70,000 or 100,000 nodes, and they have Active Directory infrastructure that has been upgraded since 2000 or 1999, and we tell them you got to implement all these different group policies, you got to implement the segmentation, you're basically working against 10, 15, 20 years of infrastructure in some situations that just cannot be undone. And that becomes a bigger problem. I use this analogy quite a bit. In your organization today, if you look at all the technology that is deployed on your desktop, all the technology that is deployed in your personal build for your workstations and your laptop computers, there's a tremendous amount of bloatware and software that's installed by default. Same thing goes for the server-side applications and the applications that are used by your organization. These things do not go away. They continue to perpetrate and kind of live on forever. And we don't clean these things out as much as we absolutely should. But all that being said, there are some really, really beautiful glimmers of hope. User behavioral analytics is a great step in the right direction. Is it the silver bullet we've been looking for? No. But it's a hell of a lot better than SIMs. I said this last year and I'll say it again. SIMs do not work. And ultimately there's somebody in here that's really into Splunk and they're like, but I love my SIM. I love regular expressions. It works for me. You are the 1%. The vast majority of organizations that we test, their SIMs pull up squat. So yes, it may work for you. It may be one of those things where you say, if it works for me, it should work for everybody, but you're a precious, unique, and wonderful snowflake. We do not see, by and large, SIMs detecting a large amount of lateral movement. If you look at a lot of the user behavioral analytics tools out there, Exabeam, Rapid7 User Behavioral Analytics, Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, they do detect a large amount of lateral movement. But here's where it gets interesting. Many of these tools are tuned in such a way to detect penetration testers, not attackers. Let me clarify. Whenever you're doing a penetration test, how long do you have generally to do an internal penetration test? 1 week. So you do fast things, right? Like you're going to use PowerShell Empire to identify files. You're going to use Bloodhound to identify different systems that have local administrator rights granted to the domain users group. You're going to move fast because you don't have enough time. Today we have the BHIS team, and the biggest bitching complaint that they have for me is we don't have enough time for tests. And they're right. They are. But organizations that we test will not allow us to say, hey, can we sit on your network for 6 months? We'll give you a report at the end. If you're an attacker and you run low enough and you run slow enough, you can run underneath the radar of every single one of these tools. So keep asking yourself, are you effective at detecting a penetration tester, or are you effective at detecting an attacker? Know the difference. Understand attackers will absolutely sit on your network for months and run extremely slow to get the data that they're actually looking for as well. Advanced malware protection. This is a bit of a mixed bag, right? We did a presentation earlier this year. Actually, Ed and I did a presentation, and we were talking about bypassing advanced security suites, application whitelisting, bypassing tools like Cylance. And we actually like a large number of these different tools. And it's amazing how whenever you talk about bypassing some of these tools, how defensive many of these authors can be, the people that write these tools. They tend to say couldn't actually do that. We did that in our lab. It doesn't work. There are very few organizations where you find a vulnerability and they fix it in less than 24 hours. Very, very few. They'll stand up, admit they have a mistake or a problem, and then try to fix it. But it's a step in the right direction. It's absolutely a step in the right direction. I'll talk more about that on another slide. It's good. There's still problems, but it's good. We're seeing people kind of grow. We're seeing a large amount of people that have resistance to the right things. We get quotes all the time. We want a full penetration test of 10,000 nodes in 1 week for $7,000. You know what? I can absolutely run a scan, convert it into a Word document, and send it to you. Funny thing about that. So we had a customer that we were testing. Lawrence is going to be like, oh God, them. Very rarely do we fire a customer, but this one we had to fire. So their infrastructure, they said they had 400 nodes. And they wanted us to do vulnerability analysis and give them some recommendations for their architecture and all that standard stuff. So Lawrence started scanning the environment, and it came back with 2,000 nodes, was it? Or was it 1,000? I think it was 5,000. I was way off. 5,000 nodes. And we went to the customer, we said, from a scope creep perspective, this is a lot more nodes than we thought. And they said, well, just find like the top 10 that you think are exploitable and then try to exploit those systems. And these were RFC 1918 IP addresses. These were internal IP addresses, okay? So we're on the inside of the network, and they're like confused. They're like, I don't know where all those nodes come from, but you know what? They were a little bit clueless through everything anyway. But usually, if you think you have 400 systems and you actually have 5,000 systems, you at least got to wake up one morning and be like, do I suck at my job? So one more thing. We sent a server to them, and we gave them directions on how to set up the scanning server, and the directions were this: plug it in, give it an Ethernet port with DHCP, log in with this user ID and password, click this little icon at the top, and give us the IP address. They said, okay, look, we need better directions than that. So we sent them more detailed instructions with pictures, and they said, this isn't good enough. Lawrence was sending it in an email. I'm like, Lawrence, try putting it in a Word doc. Send it in a Word doc, and they're like, this is perfect, thank you. They came back. I wish I could make this up. They came back, and they forwarded us this email, and they said the server is up and running, here's the IP address. And the email thread, there's all kinds of emails from their network team about how stupid we were at Black Hills Information Security. Like, those instructions were really awful. I have no idea what they're talking about. I've been a network engineer for 15 years, and these guys are quite possibly the dumbest firm I've ever met. The incompetence is rampant at Black Hills Information Security. And at the top of the email, it said, the IP address of the server is 127.0.0.1. So we scanned these systems, and we sat down with them, and we said, look, do you have servers in Finland? And they're like, no. It's on your network. They had an ISP, and their ISP put them on a flat network with all of the rest of their customers around the world. So we were like, okay, we're done here. They said to us, quote, can you just exploit the systems and tell us which ones are ours? So, another thing is, we want you to hack us like a real hacker. We want you to use real black hat techniques. By the way, here's our 99 restrictions. Don't do these things. We want you to phish our environment, but you can't phish these 99 managers. Don't phish the CFO, COO, CEO. Their feelings will get hurt. We've had tests where in the middle of the test, The CEO got phished. You remember whenever they were asking for the CFO got phished, and like there was things where like immediately transfer funds to this account so I can make this happen. That's just human stupidity. We've had tests where we're phishing. They contact us and they're like, "Is this you?" I just want to be like, "Yes, that was us," but no. And then once we say it's not us, they'll come back to us and say, "But we told you not to do this." And it's like, wait a minute, no. We did this. They did that. The Venn diagram does not touch. They're completely. We had one pen test. Is Brian in here? This was last year. I don't know if Brian Furman's in here. You don't think he made it. He's not feeling well. He had a test where he destroyed an organization. Beautiful penetration test. Well done. Great report. The CFO looked at the report and said, "There's nowhere in this report that says that you hacked our firewall. I think you need to go back and try harder." Like, what? Well, on TV, we see firewalls get hacked. Oh, all right. So, there's a learning point for this, okay? The learning point for this isn't that, wow, people are stupid. The learning point for this is there is a tremendous, huge raft of information technology refugees that are just now making it to the shore and waking up and realizing that they actually have to have testing done for the first time. Their preconceived notions are all wrong. They have no idea what things look like. They don't know what to expect. They've learned everything they know from CSI about hacking, and it's up to us to train them and be gentle with them. You don't laugh at them. Unless they ask you to do illegal things like hack servers in Hong Kong because they just want to find out what would happen. We need to educate our customers as much as possible because that is a trend. We're seeing more and more organizations that have no idea what security is beyond patching. They have no idea what penetration testing is beyond what they see in Hollywood, and it's up to us to educate them. The people in this room, do it in such a way that's not a joke on them. I know I'm doing it here at Derbycon. I understand that. I like to think this is kind of a friendly place. I know this is going online. But at the same time, we need to be willing and open to explain things. Because a lot of these questions that they're asking are bred of ignorance, and we can help educate and make things better. We do also... Thanks. Speaking of crazy customers, 80% of what we do at BHIS is repeat work from before. And that's something, out of all the things that we do, that's one of the things that makes me the proudest. And we have customers that truly get it. We have customers that set up environments for us that we can go in and we can test at any time that we want. And it's beautiful. And they want to do better, right? But sometimes they send me emails that are just the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. Without a doubt, the craziest and coolest email I got from a customer, a repeat customer, was this one. It says, pretext for this test, target to destroy the damaged credibility of blue teams globally and reduce the security budget of all industries everywhere to create a contagious sense of hopelessness within the InfoSec community. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled is to convince the world he did not exist. This is just another attack in a long-running campaign by the same attackers, a group called Black Hats Matter. That's us. All right, right? Has learned over the last 6 months, redacted. They have decided that the only attack left open is total network domination to be achieved by only targeting the security team and visibility of devices themselves, attacking the security devices. They have identified the machine of an angry millennial developer who's in a diminished security posture because his boss instructed me that his productivity was being reduced by traditional security. I convinced the developer to at least run without admin and to allow redacted to be installed due to its low CPU and memory footprint. Bloodhound has identified in a previously remediated attack that its developer is logged into a test server with a highly privileged blank credentials. Scan has also been logged into. Black Hats Matter has hypothesized that all detective tools have whitelisted the scanner and its creds. The attackers believe that by attacking the scanner itself, no alerts will be raised. The next step is to use this scanner to implant malware into the blank server on Patch Tuesday. Only in this way will the malware become part of the blank baselines. Recon and data exfiltration will be accomplished during the network scans to hide anomalous Windows traffic. I love this email because it's insane. I wish every customer was like this. And we test and we work with this customer regularly, and it's gotten to the point where it's like, we want to try X. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty insane. Let's do it. And it's like, awesome. But we need to be kind of forward tilting, and kind of the goal of this email and everything that's being talked about in this email is attacking security tools themselves. We need to start attacking security tools. I cannot stress how horribly written many of these security tools, especially these tools that have multi-million-dollar marketing budgets that you see absolutely everywhere, are horrible dumpster fires. Let's start attacking them, okay? All right, so heavy skew. We have a tremendous, huge skew in the industry from what real attacks are doing. If you look at it a little bit closer, you'll see it. We see a lot of watered down testing that's coming up, and this is within the last 12 months. And once again, it's that raft of refugees. In this group of customers, they scare me, but they're harder to work with. We have a number of customers and potential customers that have came to us not because they want to learn about security vulnerabilities, but because they want us to make them look good. This has always been a fight, right? It's always been a fight where you give somebody a critical rating and they come back and they're like, well, I don't think we're critical. I mean, isn't everyone running Windows 2000 at the edge of their network? I mean, come on, it's got to be used all the time, right? No, it's not. So we have had an uptick in this year. We've had about 4 tests where the companies and the organizations that we're testing, management or the people that we're working with on the test, will come right out and they will insult testers. Like there was one, I don't know where Derek's at. I saw him come in. I threw a box at him earlier. Oh, there he is. Derek was on a test and went out to dinner with the company before we actually got started, and the manager was outright just insulting. Like, oh, this guy's not getting anywhere. He's not going to achieve anything. Whenever Derek finally took over the entire organization, the guy went into his office and started throwing chairs around. And you don't get too proud. Okay, so I was proud of Derek. I was like, all right, buddy. But his concern was that the penetration testing report would reflect poorly on him and his job. We can't allow that to happen, okay? We can't allow that to happen. A lot of our reports, we have the same vulnerabilities that we identify, the same weaknesses that we identify, and we go out of our way to try to explain that these vulnerabilities and weaknesses that we see in your organization are also the same weaknesses and vulnerabilities that we see across multiple organizations. And it's a systemic weakness in our information security architectures and the way that they're being designed and built today. Give your direct customers a way out. As a penetration tester and as a human being, you've got to help out your other systems administrators and network administrators and security administrators that you do work for. So help them out as much as you possibly can. But I will warn you, there are a large number of the quote-unquote refugees that are coming into the world of penetration testing and security assessments that do not care about computer security. One bit. The only thing that they care about is looking good to their CEO, CFO, and CTO. So here's a trick for dealing with them. Number 1, don't fight them. I try to stress this as much as possible. The quickest way to lose an argument is by arguing. So what you can do, and some people would disagree with me on this, and that's great. I don't mind that. Send them the first report, and then offer to come in and do a retest after they fix those vulnerabilities to give them a better report. There's 2 things that are nice about this. The first thing that's nice is they get a nice report at the end that they can actually show management. The other thing that's nice for you is you can sleep well at night knowing that you at least forced an organization to take some level of action. And sometimes that's all we ask for, right? Is to see some level of improvement in an organization. So we get that. So everybody wins. We don't have to beat people's heads in with the types of vulnerabilities and findings that we think that they should be trying to deal with. And if they don't listen to us, we stomp off into the sunset. And a lot of this, ultimately, whenever I'm talking about these problems, can be solved by having clear delineations between what we do whenever we do a penetration test. So let me use an example, right? So phishing. Phishing can mean 100 different things to organizations, right? Phishing, if we're looking at RFPs, we have RFPs that come back and say they want a pure black box penetration test, but they want you to phish 1,000 users. Now, most anti-spam appliances today, if you hit it with 1,000 emails, they will trip. It doesn't matter what's in that email. Just by the volume that's coming in, they're going to trip. Even if you try to slow it down and spread it out over time, it's going to trip just by the sheer volume. This is not how the bad guys do it. The bad guys target your CEO, CIO, CTO, your systems administrators, your security administrators, and they target that person in week 1. If they get in, great. Then on week 2, they do a highly targeted attack against another user. And if that works, great. If they don't, they wait a little bit longer, and they change the ruse almost every single time before they finally get something that's going to work. So if you have the scope item, one of the things that works fairly well is if it's in the RFP that you have to test 1,000 emails, what you can do is target 5 users over the course of the test, use highly targeted attacks, and then simply blast out the other 995 at the end. This is kind of fun because what happens is you gain access, you pivot, you do what you need to do, and then whenever you blast them with the 995, they're like, we caught you. We see you right there. We got it. And it's like, well, did you catch the things the weeks before? What? So it's a way to kind of work around those restrictions, because a lot of those restrictions and those requirements that they put on may not be something that they can remove whenever you talk to them throughout the proposal process. And ultimately what this boils down to, using phishing as an example, is we need to take penetration testing and fracture it. And by fracturing it, we need to break it into categories. This is something Ed SCOTUS has had in 560 since 2007, 2008 timeframe. It needs to be fractured into different areas. And in fact, we break these up into different proposals to clearly delineate them. You have a vulnerability assessment. We all know what that is. We have a penetration test, which I'll talk about that here on the next slide. And then we have red teaming, that we can do more advanced attacks against an organization. And only in this way can we get some level of clarity whenever we're talking about providing a letter of attestation. Now, what is a letter of attestation? A letter of attestation states that we did a penetration test, your organization was relatively clean, you're operating with a safe level of computer security, but it's hard to do that when they completely restrict you. If you can define it properly as a vulnerability test, as a penetration test, or a red team, then your letter of attestation has better meaning. So a penetration test and a vulnerability assessment, these would be in the category of more comprehensive. You're working with the organization. It's a white box penetration test. They know where you're coming from. They're creating filters in their email to allow these things to go through. It is more comprehensive. It allows for good scanning and automation, and the reports tend to be a lot bigger. Now, if you have a customer or you're an organization, you've done this for years, that's great. That's awesome. These are valuable things. I see a lot of penetration testers say, this is stupid, don't do this. You should do this if you've never done them before, without question. But if you have done them, then you should be moving on to a red team. And be clear what a red team does. We're reserving this for more advanced customers. Customers who have already done the regular scanning. It's a fundamentally different approach to the standard penetration test and scan. It involves custom malware and more fluid social engineering attacks as well. It also allows us to do threat modeling. And in threat modeling, it allows us to look at what the bad guys are doing in a specific industry and match their tactics. This takes a lot longer, but being able to do that is a very powerful tool in your arsenal. And this is also one of the only places where I see threat intelligence feeds and write-ups on different types of attacks that have value, because it allows us to model our attacks. And it's really cool if you can say, well, you know, the type of attack that we're using here is actually the same attack that's being used by APT 62-4B. And people are like, well, wow, that guy's really smart. He's got dashes in his descriptions. Advanced endpoint security. We're seeing Vision. If you guys haven't checked out Vision, check out Vision. It is the only endpoint security tool that I know of today that actually has active defense and cyber deception built into it. It is really, really very, very cool. You have things like Cylance and Bit9 and CrowdStrike and all of these. And I don't want to go into details on any of them because we're going to save that for sacred cash cow tipping a little bit later on this year. But most of these tools are absolute disastrous train wrecks. Their marketing is fantastic and the tools are beautiful. But whenever we're actually testing these tools, they have tremendous issues. Whitelisting as part of being a tester is a thing. We need to get used to it as well. And a lot of smaller organizations are the ones that we're seeing implementing these tools effectively in these organizations as well. And yeah, please don't purchase any of your purchasing decisions on how much money and how many banners they have in airports around the country. Some other fun things. Customers watching us. This is from a test that Sally did. She noticed that everything she tried, it would work for a second, and then it would go away, and then it wouldn't work again. She ran about 2-3 days testing things. It was working, and then all of a sudden things would disappear. So she popped up Notepad and typed in, "I see you guys are messing with me." And then the cursor took over and said, "I don't know what you mean." You've been having fun all day. It's cool because it's forcing me to learn new tricks. Sally was trying to be positive when she wanted to kill them. And then the person said, "I'll get out of your way. I did apply the updated policy to make the lab more consistent with the field. No more input from me," and there's more. "But you took PowerShell away from me. If you can find a way to elevate your privileges, then we'll give it back to you again." This isn't a pen test. This is a freaking reoccurring nightmare of mine. Good job. That's gone. All right? The lesson is we better get good at bypassing more advanced endpoint suites and odd customers. They're going to become more commonplace. And we're going to see kind of a breakdown in good security implemented in organizations and poor security. It's going to become more dramatic. So hard stuff, time to jump into a debugger. Code reviews are usually a nightmare. I'm still amazed that we do code reviews and we find gets. Usually when we see gets in a code review and it doesn't allow for any filtering of input size for buffer, we're just like, okay, we're done. Kill them with fire, start over from scratch. It's just a good way to approach it. But there's never enough time to go through these things. So I want to show you some quick, weird, freaky things that we're starting to find vulnerabilities in. This is from a webcast we did. This is a vulnerability that we discovered in FatPipe. It was disclosed to the vendor. The vendor didn't do anything for 2-3 months. And then we did a webcast where we disclosed it to the vendor again publicly. And it was fixed within 24 hours. That's how these things tend to work. And the big problem is right here. If you look, you can see where it says two-fish algorithm and the key. The VPN used a static key for every installation. Joff was able to decompile it. And by the way, I want to reiterate, this company was awesome after they saw the webcast because they threatened not to sue us, which is cool. I love it whenever you're talking to somebody and they're like, "We're totally not going to sue you. Don't worry about that." Okay, thanks. We're not going to sue you at all. Sleep well. All right. And it kind of gets into electronic codebook mode. And you can take that key and you can put in ciphertext, and then you can basically crack all the traffic going back and forth between the VPN. And this is the output of Joff's tool. Joff's right over there. Joff's going to talk about Java deserialization attacks because he likes doing things at BHIS that are really freaking hard. But this is kind of fun, right? This isn't scan and exploit. This is actually decompiling Java and then looking for vulnerabilities within that Java. So password spraying, Bo is going to talk about some more interesting mail attacks tomorrow. I'll talk about that here in a second. But you can password spray an Outlook web access portal and find passwords. Now that doesn't sound that cool, but you start with a list of possible passwords and then you spray them and you look at the length of the data that's received, and if it's a certain size, it means you successfully got in. If it's another size, it means it wasn't successful. Oh, by the way, this also works whenever two-factor authentication is enabled. So you may not be able to log in, but you know what their password is. And if you know somebody's passwords, what are some easy, fun things that you can do from that point? Well, a lot, actually. Right? So the lesson from this is exploits are not always going to be buffer and heap overflows, right? We need to look deeper into the logic of things. So come to Bo, Derek, and Joff's talks tomorrow. We're going to give you guys something wonderful. Okay? And at the end of this presentation, I got something wonderful and free for you as well. We love software-defined radio. Is anyone starting to play with SDR? Cool. It is fantastic. I'm going to give you a resource here in just a second that'll kind of jumpstart you guys. But it can be frustrating, especially whenever you're trying to create your own flow graphs in GNU radio. This, unless you build it or have somebody that's built one for you and you tweak it, this can be an incredible pain in the butt to set this up properly whenever you're trying to decode wireless signals. But some of the fun things you can do is you can actually intercept and you can steal garage door openers. And someone pushes the button, wait for them to leave, and then enter their house. And I just know based on statistics, I just turned one of you into a much more effective stalker. Converting it to binary can be very, very difficult. But there's this wonderful website called fieldxp.com. Please take a picture of that. Fieldxp.com has a bunch of resources from the books Field Expedient Linux Volume 1, 2, and 3. And all of the scripts and all the different labs and the exercises in the book are available for free, and you can pull down all the GNU flow graphs or GNU radio flow graphs and start jump-starting your SDR research that you do, including the one that actually takes OOK and converts it into a binary file that you can then play back. It also has one for phase shifting key as well. Also think that you should be attacking hardware. Brian, who's not here and we're hoping he's feeling well tomorrow, is giving a presentation on hardware hacking tomorrow. And he's actually got a suitcase filled with crap. And he's going to bring it up and he's actually going to do JTAGs and do some soldering on the fly to get you guys started with hardware hacking tomorrow. So that'll be really cool. So the lesson for this is security is moving on. It's not just operating system and web security anymore. It's time for us to specialize. Okay? Also, commodity network testing, I hate to say this, is going to go to the puppy mills. We can't compete. And I want to explain why. Whenever you're somebody like Mandiant or Verizon or a large security vendor, let's just look at Rapid7. Nothing against these companies, but this is what they can do. They make a lot of money in services and they make a lot of money in hardware. A lot of these companies are getting to the point where they can do a penetration test for free and then sell you a bunch of crap at the end of that penetration test. Now, free is arbitrary. It could be like $5,000, $6,000. It's going to be harder and harder for the general penetration testing firm to keep up. So start specializing. Get better. Oh, one more thing. This has been the worst year of my life. Period. A year ago, I sat right over there, and I watched Nickerson give a presentation about the year that he went through. It was a weird presentation. And I remember thinking, well, I hope I don't ever have a year that bad. Mine was worse. I had some things happen with me physically with my shoulder. My mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in January of this year and passed away 2 weeks ago. She was the CFO of our company, and she meant a lot to a lot of people. Yes, she did actually run BHIS, and yes, she did in fact socially engineer and break into a prison. She was awesome. So even before she got sick, we named our hunt teaming product after her. Rita is what it's called. Real Intelligence Threat Analytics. We released it last year here. Rita 2.0 is ready. Do we have the developer startup? I think we have Katie and Joe and Lisa and Lawrence. So these guys have worked all year. Thanks, guys. These guys have literally worked all year on this project and this project alone. Joe and Lisa went down to a customer site in Texas, and Lawrence was there too. And the customer put them in a room that was 40 degrees in their network operations center without any warm clothing, and they stayed there all week coding up things for this customer. And they didn't complain until they got home. But they've been absolute rock stars. Now, Rita 1.0 is based on Python. Rita 1.0 had a lot of interesting ideas and concepts like Fourier transforms. Rita 2.0 is a complete rewrite. In fact, Rita 2.0 is the entire back-end and sensor installation for the commercial product that we have at Offensive Countermeasures called AI Hunt, and we're releasing the entire thing for free. All the analysis modules, all of the different outputs, POSIX compliant, all of that is going to be released. Mathematically, it's orders of magnitude faster than what we had before. Did we ever get some clear numbers on that, Joe, or have you guys been busy getting it open source? It's written in Golang, which now means it supports multi-threading, clustering, and being a lot faster than single-threaded Python. And it ingests bro logs now. We don't ingest regular logs. We now ingest pure bro. Anybody here use bro and like it? Yep. You simply give it bro logs and it spits out awesome. And it's all free. Give us a week, though. We've been separating it out. The code is already out there. You can get it here. Go ahead and take a picture. It's the HTTPS GitHub OCM Dev Rita. We're going to start doing webcasts showing people how to use this tool and implement this tool effectively in their organizations. But the code is already out there. We want to clean it up so it's a more deployable package that's easier. But the reason why we want to do this is a lot of the products that are out there that are doing hunt teaming and beaconing and network traffic analysis are too damn expensive. If you have a vendor that shows up and they say they're running 4th generation artificial intelligence and they don't actually tell you what they're doing, we're going to tell you what they're doing. And we're releasing code that's doing exactly what they're doing, and we're releasing it for free to everybody. Because those prices have to come down. I have a few more minutes, but I want to say why we decided to go this route. I mean, we were trying to go more the source fire route, but going back to my mom and the tool's namesake. My mom was someone who was always giving. Always. In life, you have people that have their hands out to take, and you have people that have their hands out to give. My mother was someone who always had her hands out to give. And I actually did talk to her about this. I ran it by her before she passed away. Like I said, she was the CFO of the company, and we had some really good conversations at the end. And she said, give it away. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You know, you're going to give out something that people will be able to use. They'll be able to use it. Maybe it'll make things cheaper for them, and maybe it'll be something cool. And she goes, maybe it won't. But you always give things away in this industry. If you look at the good firms, Trusted Sec with Social Engineering Toolkit and Artillery and the penetration testing tool that they have, you look at a lot of firms like CounterHack is here, and CounterHack puts more effort into their holiday hack challenges than most vendors that you have today put into their products. You got to look at these firms that are doing amazing things and trying to give things away for free, and I'm always trying to keep up with them. And a lot of that came from my mom. So we're trying to be a firm that has our hands out to give, not just take away. So check it out and play with it. Thank you so much. This is where we can be found. Get out of here.